Okay, I'm going to call to order the council workshop for Monday, October 23rd at 7 o'clock. Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will somebody please move the agenda for adoption? Moved by Councillor Back, second by Councillor Hanson. Call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded, motion carries. Council, we have several sets of minutes from February 6th, February 13th, and April 17th up for consideration. Are there any errors or omissions from the minutes as presented? Hearing none, will someone move adoption of the minutes from those three meetings? Moved by Councillor Hanson. Is there a seconder on the matter? Seconded by Councillor Forbes. I'll call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Okay, Council, the workshop has been called for three separate items here tonight. Depending on how these topics could seem fairly open-ended, and I get a little bit concerned. I'm chair, obviously, of workshops. In a workshop, we're going to be talking about workshop format, and so I want to make sure that there's an opportunity for people to comment. And I'm not going to be offended if you're not happy with how I've been chairing workshops or what we've been considering workshops. That's fine. That's all fair critique. I'd rather fix it now rather than sit for 3 more years with us not being satisfied with the process. So please feel free to add your comments to the discussion. But up first, I don't know, Mr. Stewart, do you want to frame this at all? I mean, we have, obviously this originated from a discussion we had on a couple of occasions that workshops may or may not be working efficiently, and I'll give it to you.
Okay, just a couple of comments, and maybe it's more in the line of some questions. To move forward, council will remember from the orientation, there's generally three types of meetings. There's regular meetings, there's in-camera meetings, and there's committee of the whole.
Speak up a little bit, please. I can't hear you.
Okay. As council will remember in the orientation, that there are three types of meetings, generally speaking. Regular meetings, in-camera meetings, and committees of the whole. And they were designed to do different things. And so I'm just going to cover a little bit of that. I will say that the committee of the whole, when it was first created as a concept, was really intended to give council more, not just this council, all the councils, more opportunity to understand and delve into complex topics before they give direction in a formal council meeting. So I can just go back over the years, and I've done all kinds of different variations of this in both North Van and in West Vancouver, but a good example of a really complex issue when we did a complete review of the utility rates and decided what the reserves needed to be, what the changes need to happen to the utility rates. That took about 4 or 5 sessions because each one of them was complex enough that council really needed to know what the consequences were of giving some direction in this particular way. The committee of the whole has some similar constraints to regular, in the sense that you've got to give notice, you've got to allow the public, if that's appropriate to attend, you've got to keep some minutes and all that kind of stuff. The same kind of thing you see for regular. There's no question that they have, committee of the whole have different purposes. And I think that's one of the questions that we need probably to ask ourselves is, what are the purposes that we're comfortable with, rather than let staff determine whether that's appropriate or not, and made some strong views from council as to what the purpose is. I mean, in some cases, it really is to educate. If there's, and Councillor Mary says this quite often, we live this stuff every day, and sometimes we really have to get you up to the sort of the level and the speed in order for you to A, discuss it and then B, provide some direction. There's also an opportunity in committees of the whole, because they are open, to provide that education to the public. So that's something that's helpful. In other cases, we really do need to have a discussion around the table as to what options council is prepared to even consider. Because there's no point going out into the council chamber and staff saying, well, we'd like to do this recommendation, and there's a 7-0 support for that. I mean, what we need to be doing is going out to the council meetings and getting direction and being successful. And it's also helpful for us to understand whether, quite frankly, what the issues are and what the strength of the support is on council. Because obviously, if you've got a 7-0, that's pretty clear direction to go into a council meeting. If you got a 4-3, and there's a whole bunch of issues still bouncing around up in the air, that's not necessarily the best time to go out and try to get some direction. So I will say that although there's some constraints, you do have, because you have a bylaw, you have a fair amount of discretion on how often you want to have individual meetings, what that schedule looks like, what the purpose of those meetings are, whether you want staff presentations or not. That may change by subject, and if so, there need to be some constraints around how long those are, so the committee of the whole doesn't feel like it's dominated by staff. It's really an opportunity for people to have a discussion. There's also some framework you can put around how formal you want them. Where we've drifted to, I would say, over the last 2 or 3 councils, is using the committee of the whole as a less formal opportunity to have a discussion and to share opinions, which means that, things like who speaks first and speaking times aren't as closely followed in the committees of the whole. But that's been a deliberate choice. So again, that's the council could tighten up if they want to. We've gone all over the map in terms of whether you want some kind of summary at the end as to what the direction is or not. Mayor Walton used to try because he'd at the end of each committee the whole meeting and say, "What did you hear, Mr. Stewart? The council directed you to do it." Most times I could come up with something, but there are some occasions when I don't know what the heck they decided. But anyway, so I'll just go to back to the mayor's comments. Really, this is just an opportunity to say, is there ways we could improve these? I mean, we can always review it after 6 months and say, did that work or not work? I remember we had some issues with a previous council, and the folks in the room weren't getting along quite as well as they should have. And we ended up creating a little bit of a score sheet that council could use to make sure that we're sticking to the rules, we're sticking to what we agreed to. I'm not suggesting we need to do that here, but I'd love to hear any suggestions you have or comments you have on are they working and what improvements could we make? I think that's.
Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've been here for 9 years, so I have seen the role of the workshop, and I've seen the role of the regular meeting and of course the closed meeting. My comments are that I think that the workshop would be more efficiently conducted if there were more formal. From my point of view, I would like to see you exercise less meetings, exercise more authority over the meeting, and keep the meeting more focused. That would be my wish. I'm not suggesting thereby that the meeting would necessarily be any shorter, but I think that the meeting would be more focused, and I think the public viewing the meeting could see a more efficient display of our points of view and our perspectives on an issue if you kept a tighter rein on the topics that were explored by the different speakers. There have been occasions where all participants have been on topic, and the whole purpose of the workshop, I think, gets diluted because we're not sufficiently focused on a topic area. I like the summary at the end in terms of coming to a decision. I think if we are all going to sit down in a room and share our points of view, it's appropriate that we drive to some kind of a decision, even if it's a range of options, and we express a point of view on that. There have been workshops that have ended with discussion having taken place, but seemingly a little progress towards any objective. Finally, I think it is important that the public participate in the workshop. I appreciate there are timing limitations, but I would like it if the meetings were ran in such a way that at least at the end there was an opportunity for public participation. Those are some of my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with all of Councillor Hanson's comments. I think more structure around the workshops themselves has to happen. I think they are just too free-flowing in nature, and I find one of the most helpful aspects is when we do get a little bit of a sum up at the end, and I know that's a challenge to the CAO, but when we can go away kind of knowing what the main issues being discussed were, you know, I often think when we're around this table, the cost that's associated with that, both the cost of the council's time and most importantly, the staff time. You know, I think we really need to be selective about what we're meeting about. And I think on the whole, we have too many workshops. And I think they are valuable in the sense that we can delve deeper into issues. But I think we've used them far too frequently, at least over the last 5 years that I've been at this table. And so that's just, you know, my comment there is that I think we could have fewer of them. I think in terms of the educational benefit, largely could be accomplished through information reports. We receive information reports on any number of issues on a regular basis, and you can pretty well get up to speed on the issues that are presented. So I would rather, you know, some of those issues be saved for information reports and actually having workshop time dedicated to them. I guess those are my main points. I think there does need to be more structure. I just find that sometimes we end up kind of talking all around an issue, and really, have we advanced it in any way or taken anything meaningful from the workshop? I often feel that we don't. So I think that's going to be key going forward. But yeah, on the whole, I think, you know, I'd like to see more different types of meetings. When we talk about the council schedule, it's kind of related. One idea that I had was to take the council out into the community, perhaps quarterly, maybe monthly would be too much, but actually scheduling a meeting in different parts of the community, not on a Monday night at 5 p.m. or 7 p.m., but another day of the week, perhaps a Saturday or Sunday morning when we might reach people that otherwise aren't engaging with their local government. And I think as we look to the next 3 years of our term, it's going to be really important that we engage people who we're not hearing from. So that's something I would put out there. You know, that we look at ways that we could perhaps get out in the community, and whether it's a regular meeting or more of a town hall style meeting where we focus on some 2 or 3 issues that really are affecting that part of the community. I'd like to explore that idea. But in terms of workshops, I think we need to be more selective on what we're meeting about and just have more structure in general.
Got it. More summaries from Dave. Got it. No. We had tried. This is going back about 10 years. We did try to do a town hall series. We ended up doing one in Edgemont Village, and there were concerns raised after we did it that the venue wasn't as accessible as it should be. It was hard for the clerks to record it. It was hard for us to make the recording available. And so they decided not to do the other town halls in the other 2 centers. Like we were going to do an East Central West and West Central East. And Richard decided not to do the other 2 because of the concerns, particularly about accessibility. But we had looked at it and tried it, and I don't think it was, you know, it's some of it is stuff that can be overcome. I mean, you know, now with virtual meetings, I mean, for 1.5 years, we conducted ourselves in no location, right? And so, you know, theoretically, we have the capability to overcome some of that accessibility challenge that we didn't have 10 years ago when we were looking at the matter. I just want to clarify something from Jim, from your comments. When you say more formal, are you saying that, I got your comment and I understand your comment on keep on target, stay on target, narrow the focus of the discussion. Got that, that's received. On more formal, I'm trying to think how that would manifest in a meeting. You know, do we want to put 2-minute speaking limits on but not necessarily a limit on the number of times you can speak? Because I mean, the point is to get a free flow of communication on a short number of topics during the course of the night, maybe 1 or 2. Tonight we have 3, but normally it's 1 or 2. So then just 2-minute snippets or 1 minute, get your question.
I think of it a little bit from the perspective of the member of the public that's watching the meeting, and I think it would generate a greater sense of efficiency if there was more structure. And I think that does mean greater enforcement of speaking time, whatever those times are. A set of rules, we live within them, and those rules are enforced.
So as other people are making their comments, I don't know, comments on speaking time, comments on traveling, taking to other locations and stuff. Councillor Forbes, any comments or Councillor Brown?
I agree with everything that Councillor Hanson had said. I think we do need a little more structure in our meetings. And what Councillor also said, in order to focus to stay up. Because sometimes we start to get off topic and then someone says, oh yeah, we should have a workshop on that, and we get off what we're trying to accomplish. On the other hand, be careful what you wish for. I don't want to get too formal so that you can't express what you really want to express, and you don't feel you had a really good chance of doing it. So I wouldn't want to see maybe a little more efficiency on time for each person so that one person can sort of take over. But I wouldn't want to see a restriction on the number other than the time that's set aside and we got to go forward in order to, you know, that kind of thing, like we had the council meetings. I like the idea of going out to the neighborhood, but I can see what you're saying and the difficulties of the electronics and being able to make that accessible to the community. So that would, it makes me feel like, although I like that, maybe there's something we can do to bring the community more into here. I had said to Councillor Vack, you know, some people are intimidated and they may want to come, but they're intimidated to come up to the district hall and come into the formal room and talk. So that's one thing I like about going out to the public. I do think we need to be more focused. I don't think we need to have a decision by the end because I think the workshop gives councillors a chance to hear what everybody's saying, maybe something you haven't thought about, and then you get a chance to go away with a summary. I would like a summary too. You get a chance to have a summary on and rethink what you've heard, and maybe your position might have changed a little or not changed. So I don't want to be rushed into a decision at the workshop necessarily, but certainly be prepared to come to, when it comes up on the agenda, to have a vote on that. As far as, I think what we were all feeling, or at least I'll speak for myself, there were some workshops where it was, and this is no bad in, I'm not saying bad on staff either, but there were some workshops like the IT update, and then we had that crammed in with something else that night too, and it was too much. It was just too much, and I don't think that does a service to the presenters, whoever the staff, and whatever the topic is, or does it do a service to council to actually be able to take it in. So I think we need to have a little more control over finding out what things staff would like to report to council on in the next, say, 3 months, and then set up a timeline where that can be presented, leaving a little bit of space for anything else that might come up that we need to talk about that comes up on the council agenda. So I think, yeah, we just felt kind of, I mean, I think I used the word before, prescribed, that the meetings were all prescribed before council sat down. And the other thing is, I would like, how can council get more involved about setting what the topic is? Not having it mandated down to us by the chair of the meeting or the mayor, but how can the council put forward something that we really think council needs to look at or have further explanation about? So I'd like to see that as well, a little bit more of a chance to be on the agenda.
And well, we obviously can do that. If you write a report to council, you can make the recommendation at the end and refer to a workshop. So there is a mechanism from council to get, but you still, because it's deciding how to use council's time, you either need to get the CAO's consent, a majority of council's consent, to be able to do it that way. But you can have a report to council where the recommendation is that this be referred to a workshop for discussion.
But can we take that formality out at all and just sort of, if there's something that a council wants to bring to a workshop, we put it out to council informally and say, you know, we want a workshop on this, and if you get...
I would even take it one step further. But I'd like, I'm just thinking of ways to move some of this forward. And one of the ways is we could, on a quarterly basis, the start or the end of an in-camera meeting, say this is the scheduled workshops for the next 3 months. Are there any you don't want to have? You know, and is there anything missing? Because we're constantly changing that schedule, and that's easy enough to do. But I think it's just that little bit of communication so we can plan a little better.
I still want to press that to a decision by council to choose to use your time that way, though. I mean, if the CAO says this is important to the corporation and we need to put it forward from the CAO's office for discussion, fine. If the council, as a majority of council, says we want to commit our time to that, fine, great, that's great. But if one member of council is saying, I want to talk about this, 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 that doesn't automatically mean we're going to schedule a whole bunch of extra workshops to address those issues. So there still has to be a test of support from the council that that's how they want to spend their time. And so I think the easiest way to do that is a referral from council with a council motion, but you could also do it show of hands and straw poll at the end of it in camera.
Just an idea, like I say, try it for 3 months or 4 quarters, and it doesn't work.
When I look at workshops, like I kind of think that they really fulfill sort of 3 kind of roles. One, they're taking an extremely complex issue that that we just need to do a deeper dive of. 2, that they're taking an issue where there isn't a clear consensus of council and trying to get rid of bad options out of the group so that we move from being 2-2 and 1-1 to maybe, you know, 3-2 and 1-1 or something where you start to narrow what the actual council is going to be making the decision on. And then thirdly, I guess, really where we need to go into a deeper dive for the public's benefit about a particular issue. For property tax acts is an example that came to mind. We wanted to really go into depth on that so that it was reported on. You know, and so, you know, that's kind of how I see the workshop space largely being used. If a matter can be, looks like there's going to be a consensus, it's something that can be explained easily, we should just be putting it forward as a regular council meeting agenda. And really reserving the workshop time for stuff that's going to require one of those other benefits from it. No, I hear what you're saying. Councillor Ma?
Thank you. No, although the current format of workshops is supposed to be less formal, there are times when I find it kind of like council light. There's still speaking order, there's still time limits, which, you know, gives us some structure. But I would like to see a little more ebb and flow, but not with long speeches, and have some, you know, frank discussions. And I don't know if we're supposed to be debating things or just giving our opinion, but you know, I think back to last week when we were talking about secondary suites and the need to adjust FSR. There was a lot of back and forth at council, and you know, it was good when you explained, well, if you do this, there's some implications here. Like it really helped me, you know, maybe because I'm a new councillor, to better understand some complex issues. I enjoyed that session. Like I think I said it during the meeting. This was actually kind of interesting. But I think a lot of it is how we move ahead. There'll be a big responsibility on the chair to really keep the flow going. And I don't envy you being in that position, but I would like to use workshops to really dig into complex issues. And, you know, if we don't need workshops, we just, you know, skip them. But yeah, my first set of comments.
So less formal but better behavior.
and a free exchange of information and, you know, opinions, and maybe, you know, what was your comment? You know, be open to persuasion. I think of it last week. I think Councillor Hanson said, look, if you guys support this motion on secondary suites, I will support, you know, bringing it back to look at FSR. And I said, great, that was, that worked for me. I don't know if that would have come up if we didn't have that free flow that night.
And that night was a regular meeting of council, which did turn into more of a workshop because we had follow-up questions on something that was supposed to be a fairly simple follow-up motion, but ended up becoming a council discussion. Again, my view is that's will of the room. If the council wants to spend their time talking about those things, and my job is to help support you to do that. But if it would be more appropriate to ask at an earlier stage, can we refer this to another meeting format, then I need to press for that, I guess. Yeah. Councillor Pope.
Could I just make one last comment, please?
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, Catherine.
Your time's up. That's it. Sorry, cut off. Yes.
I will owe you a minute next workshop. But the current format, I find, okay, get a question and ask it, and then sometimes I get an answer that I understand. Other times I'm kind of like, I'm still left thinking. But there's not enough going back. Well, hey, can you explain that again, or can you, explain that point that you made, right? Like, I would find that helpful. But thank you.
Yeah, I'd really like to pick up on that because actually I couldn't agree more. My feeling on this is that actually I would like less formality and more ability to have conversations and disagreements and debates when it comes to issues. Now, the way to maybe build in more formal and structure into that is to have a stronger, facilitation of it. In other words, we lay out very clearly at the start what the goal is, and if it's, so one thing I've noticed is that we, certain people have a tendency to go off on these completely unrelated issues that really extends our time in here. And I find it very frustrating. So I'm not quite sure what the answer to that is. I think in some way it's a combination of a more formal structure or reduced speaking time. But at the end of the day, I totally agree with Councillor Ma that I really appreciate some interaction, as long as it's respectful, obviously, and some differing opinions that can be brought to the table instead of just each person's, speaking and that's it. So there's that. I think that this got mainly on my radar about having a conversation about workshops because I find that I'm consistently baffled by the content of the workshops. And picking up on what you were saying, Councillor Forbes, that I would also like to see more of a council input into what's going into the workshops. And again, I would like to see more of a goal-oriented workshop so that we know what we're here to do. Oh, today, we're talking about the short-term rentals, and out of this meeting, we want to be able to direct staff, or at least have staff understand where we're at with this and what we would like to see come back to us. And in that regard, I am totally opposed to a summary by the CAO. No offense. It's just that any summary is only as good as the person's lens who's giving it. And I have frequently seen summaries that do not reflect my opinions and my wishes and my goals at all on this council. And I've also seen summaries that completely leave out, and this is why I got onto the minutes much earlier in the term. I've seen that the minutes have not included all sides of a discussion, And the problem with that is that when staff came back, they would not be including sort of what was said around the table. Now, I realize it's hard when there's a council that's divided, but that is why I am not in favor of summaries. Because also now that the minutes are more thorough, that any one of us can go back and refer to the minutes to see what was said and to come up with our own opinions about how we summarize that and what we think is the most important thing out of that particular discussion.
May I say then, so you think the nature of the CAO's wrap up at the end shouldn't be to summarize the points of discussion, but more or less to say what the next steps are going to be?
Sure.
Or if there was clear or not clear direction. I mean, I might as well give you that feedback.
Because of a summary.
Well, it isn't, because if the purpose was to give staff some direction about where council wants to go, there's something that's going to go out in that chambers. I can't say, oh, and council, council provided this direction when there were 7 different voices. That's my big challenge.
I'd rather have you say in the meeting whether you saw consensus or not.
Yeah.
And if you didn't see consensus, then we address that in that moment. And so you can say, you know, I actually thought there was a different opinion there. And so I think when you are doing the summaries, highlight where you saw consensus. And then on the areas where you didn't see consensus achieved, say it then and there while we're all still in the room. I think just because.
I think that would be helpful, because I would like to, I will never forget the budget process that we went through. And there were some very loud voices at this table and very loud voices out in public and sending us messages about wanting ATFs and wanting more outdoor facilities and wanting more mobility transportation. And the next thing that happened was we came back to a budget draft that had none of those things in it. It caused huge delays in getting the budget passed at all, because we had to go through many more processes to where it finally got to, and I'm very happy where it finally got to. But to me, that's the problem with the current system that we have. When certain voices are either heard or not heard, and summarized or not summarized or included in that summary. Community meetings, I think that's a great idea. And I would support that. I also think we need to be more goal-oriented about what our workshops and what our content is. For example, I don't think any developers should ever be in here with their projects. I think it's up to us as councillors to meet outside, to hear what the developers have to say if we so choose, or ask them to send us their information, or talk to staff about what that project is about or what their understanding is and any questions. I don't think this is the place to hear from a developer about whatever their project details are.
That's generally been our practice for decades.
But we haven't been doing that. We've been hearing from various projects.
The only time we sort of kind of allowed it was when we were talking about what was going to be the impact in the district of the confluence of 4 projects in Lynn Valley all at once, all in the same area. Other than that, I generally have kept the developers away from the workshops. Mr. Bloomer?
Just to back up a little bit, the history has been town center updates. So we provide an update on the town center. And then if there is a large project that is at a preliminary stage, it's not a detailed application, but just a concept, then we have introduced it. But it's been a staff introduction as to, oh, we've received this. Does council have any concerns or questions that we think need to get answered when it does move forward to a detailed application stage? The applicants are never asked to comment or speak. They simply submit the application instead. This is a conversation between staff and council. I have to admit, though, there have been a couple occasions where councillors turn and invite a comment.
Well, they're hanging out in the room. They're listening. They're members of the public. They're allowed to be in the room.
It's awkward.
Yeah, and that definitely gets awkward because we definitely instruct the applicants this isn't that forum.
Oh, they're you know keenly waiting for a question to bring them to the table discussion.
Yeah. But the value has been that some of the large applications include maybe a potential public amenity attached to them. And that's a useful thing to know if that has any relevance for council. Or if they're asking for density well beyond what council's policies allow, right? Or would support under the OCP. And that is typically then a trade-off of benefits. So they're asking for some sort of negotiated trade-off. And it's useful to have an early conversation with council on those for only significant applications, so for the large ones, in the context of the whole development of the town center. That's where we brought them forward. And the 3 that we did in the last year, right, were large projects, and then we provided an update. But if they're not, you know, if council as a body feels that that's not a useful forum in which to have that conversation, that's up to council. But it certainly has proven helpful for staff, especially when there are the proposals that are outside of the policy direction council's already provided.
Maybe then there's a soft sense that updates about town center development. I mean, that could come to this workshop and then share it with the community. There's usually a short presentation on that. But any discussions around specific projects should probably go in camera.
Or just not have the developers in the room.
It's a public meeting. You can't control whether they're here.
Well, not, okay, let me put it this way. Not on the agenda as presenters.
No, never. They never.
Yeah. Okay. And what was the other one?
Lionsgate.
Sure.
Sorry. We had 2 town center updates. We had the one on Lynn Valley, discussing the Safeway site and how it fit into the rest of Lynn Valley, and then we also had Lionsgate.
And Lynn Creek, the center. So those are the last 3. Large projects, big community benefit conversations.
The town center, the purpose isn't to do an early input opportunity for the development. The purpose is to talk about the public sphere in and around that space. But I get it. It's you know, that we don't want to be confusing the two. Keep the formality on when the council is actually discussing the proposal.
Yeah, in each of those proposals, there was a significant community, I don't know, amenity or infrastructure attached to it. Either a road going through the property, a potential fire hall,
yeah.
And then a significant change to the public space that was proposed, as well as student housing. So there was essentially big decisions, big conversations that were at that level of the neighborhood, right? Impact.
You could do it as a regular council meeting agenda item and just do it as a staff presentation on the state of it, and less discussion oriented. That would be.
That's what I think too. I think that's another thing that could be moved out into the chambers, and then we're moving things forward as opposed to spending endless time talking about them.
That's fair. Councillor Mary.
Thanks. So we used to do that actually when we decided that we wanted to include early input from developers, and it always used to go to a council meeting. And for some reason we stopped doing that, and it's changed in various ways. It doesn't seem to be a very consistent approach to early input. They used to come to a council meeting. It had early input on the agenda. It wasn't in a workshop format, and it was far more efficient in my opinion. Workshops have been, this comes up with every council, the issue of meeting schedules, workshops, agendas. I would like to ask the clerk, how many workshops have we had since January? Do we have that number? Well, we're looking for it, I'll continue. But I counted in May to today, like 11. I think it was probably 10. I was going through my calendar, how many workshops we have, excluding August, of course, but it averages about 2 a month. It's not huge. We used to have, you know, a meeting every week, an agenda every week. We used to have a hearing every week. Then we'd have our committee meetings. And I think sometimes what happens is it's feast or famine. One week we get nothing. The next week we're out every single night. And it's too much. So there needs to be a better balance and more discussion, Mayor Little, when you're setting the agendas. I think that's where we could focus our attention. on setting those agendas. I think a couple of weeks ago, there was a workshop tonight. There was one tomorrow night. It was spread out. And it was like, why can't we just get everything done on one night? But then there's other nights where, you know, like the discussion on communication, it was loaded with 3 other topics. And communication has been something that we've been requesting for years. Like the website, we keep bringing it up over and over and over again. And then it's the last presentation, we run out of time and we have to push it to another night. Like, I feel like sometimes we're not paying attention. There was a time in workshops when they were first created, committee of the wholes, Assam, Little, Nixon, Hicks were on council at the time, myself. And it was a way to tear apart an issue, as the manager, Mr. Stewart, has laid out, and the mayor. But in those days, we had a very seasoned, long tenure group of senior managers who had been in the municipality for decades. And Councillor Pope brings up, why wasn't my comment included in the minutes, or my perspective? She doesn't want to hear the CAO's summary if it doesn't include all of our positions. And I understand that frustration. Workshops were an opportunity for staff to hear all of our perspectives. And I think the sweet spot 2 councils ago was when we did have staff listen to all those perspectives, and then at a subsequent meeting or an agenda item, they would try to find the middle ground with all of those perspectives to come up with a direction. And I feel now we are very policy driven. We are, staff is listening to 4 out of 7 members. If there's a consensus from 4 out of 7 members, that's the direction that we go in. And obviously some things are very, you know, you really need that rigid, structured policy. But on other things, when you're shaping a direction or you want to shape an outcome, there's lots of room for middle ground, and there's lots of room to take all of our perspectives and create a solution to a problem or a direction. So I've said this, I say this over and over again. I think that free flow of discussion like we're having right now is very important, because we are restricted in that agenda item or in that chamber. And I will tell you that mayors have different styles. We used to have a timer, and we implemented that for a term. We had a timer in workshops to create some more structure. You know, I think Mayor Little is, you know, he's sort of, you know, pulls us in when we need to pull in, but he also gives us that flexibility to be able to talk and bring up our points and our perspectives. You know, we can certainly put a timer in. I've seen that happen, and it just is mimicking a council meeting, and you don't get to say what you want to say. I bet if we timed each of us right now, some of us would have spoken for a minute, and some would have gone on far longer than that. So, you know, it's a judgment call on an issue, and I think it needs to be used in a very flexible way. So I you know, I think the Mayor and Councillor Hanson can say that we've seen this before over the decades and over the years. Jordan, Betty probably saw it in the last council as well, that there's always a willingness to sort of look at the schedule and try to make it more efficient. It's not easy to manage all of the ideas that we have and all of the issues that we're trying to deal with. And but I would say that we probably have to pay a little bit more attention to the feast or famine during the week, maybe instill a little bit more structure as far as speaking times to get our points across, and not overload those workshops with 5 things that we want to talk about. I will just finish in saying that they used to be more an opportunity to brainstorm on issues that we were stuck on, like communication. And in my opinion, I've said this before, they've turned into presentations from staff where we're given options to consider. And I much prefer going back to the brainstorming workshops than the ones we have today, because I feel they're repetitive and reflect more of a council agenda in the chamber.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. I got had a note from the clerk, so we've had 14 since the beginning of the year, so about 1.5 workshops a month.
Yeah, so really when you look at that, it's not, I think a piece of information that would be interesting is to show what kind of weeks were we just flooded with something big in a whole week, every single night, including our like look at the calendar as a whole for all of us. I think we really have to pay attention to that too, because some weeks are brutal, and then you can have 2 weeks where you don't have any meetings.
But I would argue, Councillor Murray, that I think that compared to 2 or 3 terms ago, I think we used to do back-to-back Monday, Tuesdays a lot more frequently than we do now. Yeah. In fact, I think we used to have, I'm going to go out and just make up a number on the spot, but I'm going to guess we had at least double the amount of in-camera time than we do now. And that's because the feedback I got at the beginning of last term was that we were doing too much in-camera time, and so we started to cut it down. But we used to regularly have fully scheduled Monday, Tuesday for just council business, and then you've obviously got community events and committees and other things on other nights. I tried to lighten it out a little bit. Let's ask the clerk to maybe provide some of that information, like we asked tonight about fees and charges in another row. You know, let's ask as a comparative, because the job has changed. I mean, the complexity of the reports have increased exponentially. But the amount of time that we've spent going through those reports, I agree with you, have decreased from a council meeting every week that went far beyond 10 o'clock on a regular basis. So, you know, and we're streamlining our committees, and, you know, so I think there's a lot of information that we need to look at to sort of understand where we've come and where we are right now, and comparing the past with the present, but also looking at, you know, what we're trying to achieve has been mentioned by other councillors, and what our goals are. And, you know, the question and answer and sort of the structure of the information being presented at workshops, I think is too structured. And I think there does need to be more of a free-flowing discussion for staff to form a direction from all of our perspectives, not just, you know, 4 out of 7. Councillor Pope.
Well, okay, just very quickly, I wanted to respond to something you said about my voice not being heard, because actually it wasn't about me. It was about several of us having some pretty strong feelings as representing our community about some of those issues that came up in the budget. But the thing is, Councillor Murray, you have absolutely nailed it, I think, when you say, when you talk about having room for middle ground. And I actually, for me, it's like a light bulb going off, that's what I think this workshops should be. They should be a way to find that middle ground and be able to express it to staff, to mold policy in such a way that represents the differing opinions, so that there doesn't necessarily have to be consensus for staff to go away and come back with policies that address various issues. It can be an amalgamation of different people's ideas, and to me, in a perfect world, that's the way it should operate.
So we're going to push back a little bit on that. It's just to say that often that kind of collaboration and consensus building, even if it's not always to a perfect consensus, but consensus building, it takes time. And the challenge is we're also under pressure to not take more time. Yeah. And so I remember, maybe I'm going back and, you know, sound like the old man here, but before 2011, there really was a push to try to get 5, 6, 7 votes of council. And sometimes we took extra time. I remember we delayed a particular project 2 months until we intentionally got more votes together, cobbled together. Then we hit really the Sealand development with Hines. It became very, very divisive on the council at one point. And After the Hines development and Sealand development in 2011, you saw a lot more 4 votes and go. This is where there was a frustration that things weren't moving fast enough, and it was a group on council that wanted to move faster who said, Dave, you've got 4 votes, let's go. And so we moved away from the consensus building and went more to, I want to see a show of hands, I want to see a show of hands, and go. So that consensus building went by the wayside because the consensus building was viewed as slowing down the decision that was going on at the time. So that's kind of the trade-off. It's yes, absolutely an attentive ear at the early stages from staff, maybe able to get more consensus without actually having to take more time. But it's also when it comes down to it, and we're trying to actually get 5 of 7, or 6 of 7, or 7 of 7, and we need to take a little bit more time. I need to hear that from you, that you're okay with us slowing down because we got to get something fixed in it. I'm not hearing that at council. I'm generally hearing that people want to just go. And it's very hard to build consensus in that environment. Councillor Forbes.
No, I think I've said something along those lines that I would, and to everybody's benefit, we all try to build consensus. It's not, oh, let's try to build 4 votes and go. It's build for consensus, and something that we need to pay attention to is it's not us, it's the community, what's best for the community. So, you know, a councillor has to speak for their community, not necessarily, it might not be their point of view, but if this is what their community wants, or the community that they know best, then that's who they have to speak for. So I'm in favor, and I think I said it at a council meeting, I'm not against extra workshops, and I do remember when I wasn't a councillor, but I was a council watcher, and Monday night was council, Tuesday night was workshop. You knew for 2 nights, and that didn't count the meetings. That's the way that was run. So it's not like we haven't had more meetings before, but I think what this council is looking to is to make them more efficient, more goal-orientated, and maybe that, like we said, you know, be careful what you wish for, but a little bit more structure, but still allow a little bit of free-flowing ideas, but not stall it out for what you just mentioned until you got the extra vote. Not stall it out that long, but maybe an extra meeting needs to come after council's gone around once and heard what other councillors are saying. Maybe a meeting after that, and then see if anybody's kind of come on board and changed their mind, but not kind of beat it up and have 3 or 4 meetings.
No, that's fair. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, I just want to push back a little bit on the idea that if it's being suggested, I think maybe it has that more structure is going to mean less flow of ideas. And I'm not suggesting when I say that I want a more formal meeting, a more structured meeting, that is going to take away from everyone's right to put in their point of view and to deliberate on what we hear and modify what we say according to what we hear. I just think that we could do a better job, in my view, of having a more structured meeting. I think more formality would add to that, and we would find we moved it along better. It would be more efficient. It would be more engaging for the public to listen to. We'd stay more on topic, and I think, in fact, there'd be a greater exchange of ideas.
One other point I just wanted to make is I think this is a shifting of staff as well. As you just said, it shifted after 2011. It shifted, and it went from getting consensus at going. Not getting consensus, but going with it from consensus before. So I think it's going to require staff to not look like for 4 votes or 4 light thoughts and think that's what everybody council wants. I would hope that council would, as Councillor Pope said, listen to everybody's ideas and come up with a middle ground with everybody's ideas, or maybe it's 3/4 this way and 1/4 that way, but something that is a consensus. And so I think that requires not just sort of how we're talking about how we want workshops, but it may also require a shift in staff's thinking of what's a go and what isn't a go.
So then I come to one other thing I run into all the time. We're now an hour into this. And I feel like when I say that, when I'm reminding you of the time, that it comes across like a rebuke or a wag of the finger. I have to do it to keep the meetings moving along and to keep the subject matter. And also, sometimes I have in my mind something that hasn't been presented to you yet, because in the morning meeting, I was told about the operational updates that staff are going to need to do. And I'm sitting thinking, we still got to spend 45 minutes on this other subject that's not even on the agenda because it's an operational update that just emerged this week, or something else like that, and it's become a critically important issue. So sometimes I feel like when I say we have to move along, it sounds like a rebuke or a wag of the finger. The reality is I'm just trying to get the work done that we need to get done.
It's fine. You know, maybe in the interest of transparency, you could advise us all at the beginning.
I try to.
We have to cover, and then we'd all have a better understanding of it.
If I'm not doing it, remind me, but I do try to do that at the beginning of meetings where I say, we have 4 updates from staff. It's going to take 45 minutes or something. I try to remember to do that because we do the math sort of leading up to it about how much time we need on each. So having said that, we have a lot of, I think I have a lot that I can take away. I'd love to sit down with Genevieve and just go sort of how we can maybe articulate them as sort of, go back to the council from this meeting and say, okay, we want to talk about a time limit. You know, maybe you do like a 1-minute time limit through the first bit of a discussion, and then there's a wrap-up opportunity with a little bit more time or something else like that. So that, you know, I know with Metro, which is not the panacea of efficiency, but with Metro, they do questions first, and then they do arguments. Right. And so you go through a round of discussion where it's just getting more information. It's a quick flow, free flow of 1-minute questions. And then you have your 2 minutes at the tail end, which is sort of more making your sort of general arguments.
3 minutes to talk, that's what
No, the 1 and 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 2, right? Like it's really just to sort of make the distinction between information finding and arguments around different things.
Can I just suggest a hybrid of that, and then it could also be flipped around so that it could be 1 or 2 minutes each to speak or ask questions or whatever, and then kind of open it up.
Follow-ups are shorter, yeah.
Well, I don't know about follow-ups, but just open it up to a free discussion.
Time limits.
With a time limit, yes, but just something that's interactive and, you know, that kind of.
Yeah, sure.
Can I just go back to who decides what topic warrants a workshop and how workshops get scheduled that way? Yeah. What you've heard. I think I heard the CEO say every
combination of different things that happen to make something. So council can refer something to a workshop. The CAO can recommend something for a workshop. But we also have staff opportunities. So like we typically will reserve a transportation workshop in the fall that over the course of leading up to it, Gavin and Carney will get together and figure out what they're going to populate that transportation workshop with. So sometimes we actually have a placeholder. There's almost always a parking lot of issues that we need to address, slot in as we have time to do it. And then it all gets changed when something more emergent comes along and has to take a priority. But topics come in a variety of ways. Some referred from council, some from the CAO. Largely, we also just have issues arising from the different departments that need some council time, and they're draft enough that they come to a workshop rather than a council meeting. Councillor Murray?
Just on what you just said in regards to staff populating these workshops and the efficiency of how these workshops are created. It's not always about a staff presentation. There has to be a balance between an ability for council to have a free-flowing discussion about a big issue that is impacting more people than not, and having information that staff can provide, and then a presentation from staff on an issue that they want to update us, because these really have morphed from a place of that open discussion where we can tear apart an issue and come up with some brainstorming, to, you know, presentations that go on for a significant, like some of the presentations for staff, there's like 40 slides, and it's a lot of information. And we don't get, you know, look at how much time we actually get to talk in this open forum that's more flexible. So I think there needs to be some work done on what's happening as opposed to, you know, just looking at, you know, new ways of doing things. We have to look back before we can look forward.
We had some surprise long presentations, and I think we've addressed that with staff. I know that Dan and Gavin, who probably the bulk of the presentations come in under your two areas, are very careful about how many slides there are in total, and we'll get right there too. No, it was comms and IT that we got surprised by the length of the presentation. Cyra's here; she's heard that, and that's fine. But it was, I think IT wanted to do stuff that was all very important to them and very important to the organization. It just probably was better fodder for a report rather than a full council presentation. And then to have both comms and IT on the same night, that just didn't flow so smoothly, and we ended up punting through a couple of meetings. So fair points. Okay, well, I'm going to work with Genevieve to try and come back with some suggestions from that, and we'll see
another workshop.
No need. And again, all of these things are living things. If at the end of the day it's not serving our purposes, we can change it. Councillor Mom.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you wanted to try your new idea of you know, summarizing at the end, and if there wasn't consensus to deal with it right away.
You're out of time. Yeah.
There was consensus that there's some changes needed. Yeah. There's a consensus around the fact that we need to balance all of these different interests. And I've got some ideas which I'll share with Genevieve and Mike. I think what we can do is probably give you a little bit of a smorgasbord, because there's some things that staff can do, and there's some things that you can do. Because in a lot of ways, a lot of this isn't about being formal. It's just about being disciplined and agreeing that that's how we're going to be disciplined. We have conversations.
You're all getting the agenda planner on a weekly basis. You're all seeing that. So we go over that obviously on our Monday meetings, and so that's how things get populated. The outer months are draft, and we haven't sent out notices yet. As soon as we send out a notice and kind of lock in the date, you'll see a change in the status on the agenda planner. But anything beyond that point that we haven't given notice to, again, it's subject to the needs of council. So yeah.
Okay. One quick question, because there was a question about finding better ways to interact with council, and one of the things was, are we using information reports as much as we can? And the challenge with information reports is if you don't read them, then you're not going to have that information. And you know, you're going to say, what the heck is going on? And we say, well, we told you that 3 weeks ago, didn't read it. So is the way we're giving you information reports okay?
I'm glad you raised that, because no, it's not. Actually, it needs to be in a more accessible forum.
I have no problem accessing them.
I have no problem accessing them, but sometimes we get flooded with them, and that maybe staff, if it's not something that's, you know, has to be dealt with in the next meeting, maybe they could kind of spread them out a little bit.
There's a color code, the flag on them or something.
Yeah, if something's really important or something is, read it the next 2 weeks or something like that. Because sometimes between the emails, the phone calls, the council meetings, your workshops and your committee meetings, and you sit down and go, oh God, there's this information reports I haven't read.
Sure. That's the whole point. Do you think it would be possible to assemble the information reports and
we were summarizing them last year, I think it was. And then we had a staff change, and we stopped doing that, but I think we need to do it again. And I think Adrienne does, she puts something on. She does something, but I don't know exactly where she puts it. Maybe it's just not flagging to you that says teams.
This is what I meant by more accessible.
Can I just speak to that? She does put it in her weekly email, and I just make a note once a week just to check that Teams folder, because she's on there. So,
but sometimes you're so busy and you're checking it 2 days before you should know about it. Anyway,
yeah, like I would actually like to see a file, like this is not laid out clearly. Like I'd like to see a file where it just has each title laid out so you can just click on it.
Something get cut off, right?
Oh, look, there it is.
Should just list them, the file names. There you go.
That's information.
All right, well, we're going to muck about with that a little bit. I think we can probably adjust that to make it easier for people to track what's been read, what hasn't been read, and what's still to come. I'd like to move on. And so the next item specifically is the 2024 council meeting schedule. I think I made my comments at the tail end of the meeting the other day about this, where I think, you know, objectively, if we're not finishing super early and we're not always extending the meeting, then we've kind of got the number pretty close. And there's obviously times of year, it was mentioned that right before the summer break, there becomes a little bit of a pressure. You have a bunch of projects that don't want to wait till the middle of September to be addressed. And so we do get a little bit of a stack up that tends to occur in that time period. But generally speaking, our meetings are finished in the scheduled time and not, you know, dramatically before the scheduled time. So they're not like, it's not like we're having a meeting and it's only going 45 minutes and then we're, you know, we're assembling everybody for a meeting and having it be not a great time. So I think generally we're in the ballpark. I'm totally open to tweaks on it, but we're getting the work done. The work doesn't generally have to wait a long time before it comes back on the agenda. We routinely amend the agenda for urgent emergent to move stuff forward if we need to. And as we saw tonight, when the calendar isn't sufficient, we add a special meeting, just like we did tonight. And it's not hard to do. We typically in the schedule, we always put one in January and put two meetings in January. And there's not typically a lot of council business that can qualify for the first meeting of January, because it means that the staff reports have to be in before the Christmas break in order to be able to be ready for that meeting. And so the practice has been to not have a meeting at the first half of January because of that issue. But we usually put it on the schedule and then cancel it if nothing comes up. There have been years where we decided to use that meeting. So whether it was COVID updates or what it was, we did in some years use that meeting. But generally speaking throughout the year, aside from the stacking that occurs right before the summer break, I think we're pretty close to what we need for regular meetings. That said, I'm amenable to persuasion to something different if you want to have more meetings with less content and therefore shorter meetings, or if you want to have fewer meetings and don't mind us extending the meetings until later in the evening, I'm open to that if that's what the general will of the council is. Councillor Murray.
I'm okay with the schedule generally. I think you've given us you've explained the process of the flexibility with adding a meeting if we need it. And we can, in extraordinary circumstances, go beyond 11 if it's unanimous at our regular agenda meetings. But what I find frustrating, and I found this, you know, over the years, another thing we keep bringing up and it never changes, is the big push before the Christmas break and the summer break. And we are swamped year after year after year after year. I've heard this from 4 councils have had the same criticism, that we can have that feast or famine in the early part of the year or the spring, and right before the summer break and right before Christmas, and if you look at those 2 times, you know, people go away. Christmas, there are events after events because we're getting invited to go to different, you know, evenings out. It becomes exhausting and it's too much. And it's just this every single, you know, week, there's this massive agenda. And, you know, Mr. Stewart commented on this, and I said it, you know, I've said it before, that staff do this all day long, 5 days a week. And we get one night a week or one night every other week or a workshop to try to absorb all of this information on top of everything else we do. on top of our jobs and our commitments with committees and there's some pretty serious jobs around this table that take up a lot of time. And there has to be, Mr. Stewart, a better balance to that and a better understanding of how we all operate, doing this job. I don't think it's okay to just swamp us and assume that we can absorb all of it, because some of us can't. And some of us, may be able to absorb, and then the next week not. So it's a lot. And I think that plays into the complexity of the reports, the structure of the reports. I know Councillor McKay years ago asked for, all the background to the reports to be added. And I think there's important information in there, but a lot of it, it's just too much to get through. And it's a challenge.
Well, what's the answer?
Well, the answer is that we have to go back and look at the balance and how, and we, the complexity of some of these reports. It's changed a lot. We used to have 3-page, 4-page reports. There's, various pieces of information in regards to surveys and, the consultation, which, we want to talk about consultation as well. But I think we just have to go back, look behind us to understand how we go forward and do some comparisons with how things have changed. Everything that we've done up to this point is not bad or inefficient. It's just that you got to be able to be flexible with making things work when they're not.
Yeah, I think to your point, so when we were leading up to the last election, I definitely took a much more active role in managing the loading leading up to the election. And the intention was I didn't want to have projects start before the election, span the two governments. And so we wanted to be able to get them done and then not have new stuff come forward as we were doing. So we took a very active management role on it. What I'm hearing is that you want me to be a little bit more of an active manager in the summer lead up to make sure that we're not overloading the agendas in July in particular. December, my recollection is, I remember a few key issues being decided before there, like I mentioned CLIN earlier. CLIN was a December meeting that everybody left not talking to each other for a month at the end of that one. And so I remember we did have some particularly contentious issues right before the Christmas break, which was regrettable. But I don't remember the schedules being completely overloaded. Like I don't remember us ever having to add a special meeting in the week before Christmas or anything like that. Whereas summer, we did have to do that, where we had to add special meetings in July. We had to, in one year, I remember we had to add a special in August, where we had to sort of compel everybody to be available during their vacation schedule. And we've had others. So I definitely have seen that overloading in the summer break. I haven't seen it as much in the winter break, but we can take a more active management role to make sure that that's less likely, just like we did last year. Although I wouldn't go that far. Last year, it was about not interfering with an election. In a normal year, I think we could do it much more modestly and still have a positive impact on it. I've got Councillor Ma.
Thank you. For myself, the current format of alternating council and workshops, depending on how we adjust workshop, seems to work. Generally, we're meeting about 3 times a month, and then we add special meetings and hearings as required. So there are weeks that it feels very heavy. And I was just looking at the schedule. Is this, I'm just wondering, September, being 2 stats and, UBCM, we only meet twice. I just feel like right now there's a heavy load in October, and I got a warning from someone already that this fall is going to be busy. I just don't know if there's ways to, balance that a bit, or is the workflow such that we're busy in February and March because of budget, and we're busy now because this is the fall season. Like I'm just trying to still get a sense of if there's a seasonality to work. So generally speaking, this works, but I'm still trying to make it work personally for me, given my work schedule and my other outside commitments. So, that's
And your family.
Yes.
And your most important family. There you go. Yes, there is a seasonality to it. This summer, we have a lot of senior staff and managers that take their vacation in August, and it makes it hard to get the reports ready for September. So it actually works out rather well. We have 2 stats in September, and we're not overloading the council, because to get those reports in, you would have to have had everybody doing their work through the summer months to be able to get to there, which everybody deserves a vacation. And so, but that one works out rather well. I think the break around Christmas is a little more disjointed. But October and November are typically busy until we get through really the capital stuff that we're going to be talking about shortly. And then in the spring, it tends to get busy again, February, March, April, until the budget gets passed and the budget is wrapped up in time for its statutory requirements in the middle of May. But really the pressure stops on that typically around the 3rd week of April. And so, yeah, that's it. It's October, November busy, February, March, April busy, even though you actually get a week off for spring break in there, typically.
So does our schedule reflect that? Like, let me just throw this out there. March, should we have 3 council meetings and no workshops to get through the work? Like, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, again, sometime between the latter half of March and the first half of April is spring break, which we only honor one of the 2 weeks of spring break. So the schools are off for 2 weeks. We take one of those weeks off, which I know some people travel, go to a cabin or whatever, and for the 2 weeks of spring break, but we honor 1 week break in there. And other than that, we're working.
Right, but
then LMLGA kicks up, and then FCM by June. We have other obligations there. Sorry. I've interrupted Councillor Mott twice. Councillor Mott, are you finished your thoughts?
I'm just wondering, like, because we're alternating workshops and council meetings, pretty much throughout the year. Do we need more council meetings to make decisions at peak periods or in the budget? I found it helpful having a workshop. So I'm just throwing it out there. For peak periods, do we need more of one of each, or does it depend on what topic we're covering during that peak period?
When we've added a special meeting to address those issues, and I'm totally open and willing to do that. If we look like we're starting to get behind, if we're tabling items because they're not being addressed, then I'm totally opening to us adding a special meeting to get the work done. That shouldn't be the hang up. It shouldn't take a long time to get stuff before council. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I think generally we do get it right in terms of the pace. Sometimes we're too busy, but I think overall we're getting the pace right. Just following up on a couple of specific points that were made in the discussion leading up to this schedule or concerning this schedule, and it's the first meeting and the last meeting on this schedule. The January 8th meeting, in my experience, that just meeting invariably gets canceled.
Tends to.
And from my point of view, if it's going to get canceled, maybe we should just not schedule it and then make that up somewhere else. And following up on Councillor Mary's point about the Christmas season, the December 16 meeting, that occurs in a very busy time in our social calendars in terms of, as councillors, in terms of events that we're attending. I think we might want to consider canceling that meeting, planning to do that in another way, in a special meeting along the way. But invariably, that is a very busy time and a time of challenge in terms of public participation. People are just very busy.
You have my commitment to work with staff to keep it light but I don't think that we can go 6 weeks between meetings.
That's because
we'll be going from the first week of December through to the second week of January.
I mean, maybe we could do something as simple as move that into a special meeting on a Tuesday.
Or switch out the workshop
On that 9th, the workshop on the 9th.
Workshop, yeah.
which is my original point.
And even going to the top one, if we feel we really need a meeting on the 8th of January, we'll put it down to the 6th. You know, we can hold the Tuesday special. I'm just saying, as a practical matter, we don't get that meeting off the ground in January. We don't prepare for it.
It's rare. I remember specifically, Jim's not here, but he had a whole bunch of delegations stacked up. And he said, I've told these groups they can come in and we've got to sort it out. And one year we decided to keep the January meeting. We didn't have any like development business or others. We said staff updates, and we cleared out a number of council reports and other things that we just put on that meeting. But you're right, most years the first meeting in January is canceled because it takes too much staff.
And going to the 16th, that simply encroaches upon the active Christmas season too much.
I'd like to see that, if you don't mind.
Actually, sorry, Councillor Forbes had her hand up, but you're next, yeah.
Just a couple of comments because they haven't been mentioned. We have talked about before about trying not to have complex issues or community effects in meetings in July when kids are out of school, parents go away, nobody's paying attention. So I like what you said about not loading up, try to clear out July a little bit more, not loading it up. I know sometimes I go back in August and look at what happened on the last meeting in July and I go, I don't remember that. So I think that happens and we have to keep the public involved and not make, you know, big decisions when they're probably not around, they're on holidays. And the only other thing is just a comment about me. I don't know about anybody else, but going to 10:30, I'm fine. You start pushing me past 10:30 and some nights I mean like 9:30. So I don't think we should go past 10:30. I know that you can go with the unanimous vote to go to 11, but I'm okay with, you know, going to 10:30 if we have to, rather than go to another meeting. But rather than go super late when your brain is half dead, I would rather.
You run out of like we try to have the more complex issues early in the meeting on that because we all feel it. I mean, who here started before 9 o'clock today? Yeah, okay. Looking to you, staff. It's not the best time for them at that late at night as well.
And the public.
And the public too as well. But no, fair point. And no, I don't intend to go any later on things. I think you hear about the craziness. Like, I mean, Port Moody, they voted on, I think it was 16 building project, was it? 16 building project at 2 or 3 in the morning, like just railroad style. Like they got through the public hearing and immediately went to the vote at 3 in the morning. You know, I'm glad we don't go that way. I think we're better off the way we do it.
No, I do think you found the sweet spot.
Okay. I definitely heard the comment about if we can get rid of the December 16th meeting, or at the very least keep it light. I'm there. I hear you. My calendar gets slammed in around that time too, but I am very concerned about us doing that and getting rid of the January 8th meeting because you end up with too long between necessarily. But if you can leave that with us, we'll go back over with staff what we load those meetings up with, or if we can, you know, if we keep the December 16th full, but that means we can get rid of the January 8th, is that, you know, anyway, we'll have a look at that.
There may be an opportunity.
Yeah, you're still not mentioning the 9th. So the 9th of December is a workshop.
Yep.
So why don't we just put that in as a council meeting and move the workshop to the 16th? Can we make that decision tonight?
Oh, sorry, that's the calendar for next year. So
that's true. It is the calendar.
That's the calendar for next year. The dates are different for this year.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We can't change this year anyway, can we?
Well, we already did. We've added 2 special meetings in that time. So as an example, December 11th, we've added a special meeting, and December 12th, we've added a special meeting.
Yeah, this year we don't, we're not going into the second half.
No. December 12th is the last meeting.
Exactly. And I think that's an appropriate date. It's just from there on, I made my point.
Just a suggestion based on the discussions. I mean, we might just end up, just because it's maybe easier to cancel meetings, if we flip the 8th and the 8th of January. So the workshop is now the 8th, council meeting is the.
Keep in mind, we're talking about different years. Yeah. So we're talking about generally the last meeting in December and the first meeting of January, because you're talking about the 2 at either end.
I'm just saying, if we flip both in December and January, the workshops for council meetings, then it's a lot easier to cancel a workshop than it is a council meeting.
But just we've already added 3 special meetings this December. You're going to get lots of special meeting time in December because we need to address these issues before.
Yeah.
And so I would highly encourage you to look at your agenda planner, get updated on that. Okay. Councillor Mom. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pope, then Councillor Mom. Sorry.
Thank you. So my vote is for fewer workshops and more council meetings, and I think that's achievable by taking just a few of the times within the calendar that we see that there's just reducing our council workshops to about once a month. And I think we can do that if we're more focused and goal-oriented, as we all seem to be in agreement that we need for our workshops. And I think I heard the line, we're getting the work done. Well, are we? Like with the current schedule, are we really getting the work done? Because it's not my sense of it after being here a year. My sense of it is that the pace is excruciatingly slow. And my feeling is that if we had more regular council meetings, similar to, say, the city of North Van, that we would be able to move more issues forward and more projects forward, and just be more responsive to the community and the business community that we represent. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it doesn't matter how many council meetings you have, but somehow other municipalities make it work to have no workshops. And that was my feeling about raising this issue in the first place.
Thank you. Councillor Mall.
Councillor Pope, would you like one of my minutes? No, you're good? Okay.
I missed that, Councillor Mall. What was it? One of his minutes.
Okay. You know, I was looking at the breakdown between workshops and regular council meetings, because I do think we generally get more decisions made at council meetings. But there's really only 2 months, January and April, where there's 2 workshops. Other months there's only 1 workshop. So the balance to me is pretty good. I do have a question about April. I was told that in months where there's 5 Mondays, we tend not to meet on the last Monday, but in April we are, and in July, which is almost similar layout, we're not. Can you help me to understand that? Is it just so we can get off to the summer sooner?
Genevieve, I don't know if you've got that.
Yeah, it was just to have the summer break begin sooner.
Okay.
And there's the stat holiday in April that would take one of the Mondays out of the 5 Monday equation.
Right, but that's the same for July.
Yes, it's just leading up to the August holiday.
Right. Otherwise, under the normal formula, we'd be a week later going into the break.
Okay. I think overall the structure works for me. The ability to add meetings earlier better than adding it on another night. I would prefer that. But yeah, okay.
Thank you. Councillor Bax.
Thank you. I'm generally Generally okay, but I think where we can reduce the number of workshops and have a regular meeting instead, as has been highlighted by Councilor Pope, we should. And there are a couple months there where we doubled up on workshops. I think we should add a regular meeting in there instead in place of one of those workshops. And I agree with the comments about the last meeting in December being really in a very busy week in terms of other events going on. So I would support changing that if we can. And yeah, same first week meeting in January, same thing. It's not likely to happen. So keeping that light or canceling it makes sense in cases. Yeah, so I generally think it's okay, but overall, still too many workshops. And the only other thing is sometimes I find the 5 o'clock starts a little bit challenging, and we've had quite a few of those when we have a lot of closed meetings, but the clerk's any way around that, just want to give enough time. I get that.
So the clerk's department actually tracks and has tracked for many years how many meetings we have, how long they last, and what is on the agenda, so we can provide that information to council. Just as Mr. Councilor Curtis said, you know, we've seen an evolution over time, and each council has a different kind of expectations. So I was going
to just a comment. Sometimes those staff needs those workshops as well as council because you want something to come forward in a council meeting. So if we start doing council meeting, then a workshop, it might interfere with that goal.
It'll be longer before it can actually come back to a council meeting.
Yes, exactly.
I just want to ask if, when we're considering the content of workshops going forward, if we can also consider staff time. Like, I absolutely hate seeing all our senior managers sitting here through all of this discussion when they don't necessarily have to be here for, like, if we could have flipped it around and had this discussion about the council workshops and the council schedule at the end of after the operational updates and all of that, I think that would be a much more effective use of staff time. I think they work hard enough not having to be here later than they should be.
That's fair, but senior staff find this absolutely edifying and so
interests you fast.
No comment from staff. No comment from staff.
Sometimes it's not what's on the agenda that you talk about.
I hear you. We need to be more efficient in our use of time with workshops. But having said that, if a majority of council needs to have the workshop, we gotta have the workshop. And if senior staff say it's necessary for us to be able to get to the council meeting decision, we're gonna have the workshop. But I hear your points in that we have to, like maybe we don't do the standing, all right, transportation is gonna have a workshop and then they populate it when issues arise to the surface. Maybe that's not the best way to do it. I hear you. We want to go on a workshop diet. I'm fine with that. But as far as altering the schedule goes, for 2024, I think maybe let's strike the December 16th meeting. And if you can, I think we should keep when we do the meeting schedule for 2025, maybe because we took the break so early in December that maybe we keep the meeting at the front end of January in that year. But for this year, I'm also willing to, if we don't have enough agenda for everybody to be able to dig their teeth into the meeting, then I'm happy to take out our January meeting. Yeah. Yeah. So, because we have you fairly heavily loaded for December.
And again, could we just switch it out for a workshop on the 15th or 29th?
We can if materials are ready to go for a workshop at that time. But I think again, workshops, let's not change the workshops on the schedule right now. If stuff doesn't come up for it, we'll kill them. We'll get rid of them as opportunities present. But I think we should, if we're going to formally pass a motion, I think the December 16th regular should come off.
And switch it out for the workshop in December on December 9th.
If we need a workshop at that time, but.
Yes, so council can either, if I'm understanding, Council can either move to strike the December 16th meeting altogether, so then that would leave December 9th workshop as the last meeting, or
there would still be a workshop.
So there would still be a workshop on the 9th, or you could move to cancel the workshop and put the 16th meeting there technically. So you'd have 2 regular meetings back to back. Those are the 2 options.
Given the time of year, that's totally what we should do. Yeah. My preference would be to cancel that workshop on December 9th and move the 16th regular meeting.
We'll make that as the recommendation. I don't have an issue with that. All subject to the needs of the service, right? You know, as we go in, if we've got to alter and add special meetings or whatever, we'll do it. Okay. Thank you. All right. Moving on to item 3.3. This is the workshop for 2023 capital projects update. I'm going to hand this over to staff. I'm going to sneak out for a bit of a bio break. Councillor Forbes, you're the chair, but it'll probably be entirely within staff.
Acting Mayor Forbes, I'll start, and then we'll move it over to Mr. Cohen. So I think we're on this. Listen to the conversation I just had. I think we're in pretty good shape here. So this workshop specifically responds to various requests we've received to carve out a council discussion on delivering our capital plan. To support this workshop, you have a copy of the memo with some background material for your awareness. We're not going to go through that with detail line by line. Instead, we're going to maximize council time so you can ask us some questions. Peter's here. He's going to give you a very short 4 to 5 minute verbal summary of how we deliver projects. And Ms. Werner's here from the Parks Department to answer any questions excuse me, that relate to the Parks Department. So that.
Yes, thanks, Gavin. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So just to help set some stage for this evening's discussion before we open up to Council to further discuss, we did share with you a package of information that really has 3 important components of how we deliver our projects. The first component is really on how we manage our projects. And so the last couple of years, we've transitioned into a new framework called our project management framework. You may have received an email earlier today from one of our residents who actually sent through a document, something very similar about a project management governance. And that's really just to identify best practices in project management. I just want to reassure Council that what was sent through really is in line with what we're actually doing here at the district over the last couple of years. Essentially, what that's really entailing is a step-by-step guide for how we deliver our capital projects, and we distill it down into 3 distinct phases for our projects. The first one is our needs identification phase, then our concept phase, and then our delivery phase. Throughout that whole process, we have tools and templates that guide our work, and then project governance and project leadership, such as myself. At key points in time, we do stage gates to making sure that projects are ready to move forward so that we can best manage risk for the district. I'm not going to go into too much more detail in terms of that first component, just in the interest of time, but any councillors that do have questions on our project management framework, I'm happy to talk offline one-on-one in terms of any of those pieces. The second element to the memo that we sent through is really a snapshot of time in terms of what is our status for a lot of our capital projects that we're delivering right now. Again, I'm not going to go line by line. It's 3 pages of projects, and that's just a sample of the projects that we deliver on an annual basis. Really, the primary focus, though, just for you to be aware of, is that that's just talking about some information about during our budget process earlier this year, you would have seen a very similar table that we distributed that informs some of those discussions to finalising our budget process. There's just a bit of a snapshot there in terms of what's our October 2023 update. Happy to go into more details if you have specific questions. I know from our last session, we had a lot of questions from some councillors as it relates to our active transportation program. I will touch on that proactively in just a moment as well. The third component of the memo that you have before you is really just talking about some opportunities we're finding in terms of how we can manage the public interactions, or really our customers, as it relates to projects as well. Something that we're really recognising as staff is there is really a lot of different ways in which members of the community or council can really engage and ask questions to staff. That could be things like report a problem, mayor and council email distribution list, direct communications coming to staff, our info web, and many other elements as well. One of the things that we are finding more increasingly challenging to do is to be able to actually manage and capture all of the different communications that are coming in across very different avenues and forums that we're receiving. So we do want to acknowledge that it is a challenge that we are experiencing as staff. For council's awareness, for each of the responses that we do receive that may relate to a project, particularly as it relates to council that might be CC'd or comes from council, it does take our staff several hours to actually review the email, find out what the information is, and then respond back as well. So it is a significant portion of the time that we do. And one of the things and the themes that we're starting to see is that we're starting to see a little bit of a shopping around situation, for want of a better phrase, where one inquiry might come through, an individual may not necessarily like the response they receive, and they're reaching out to different members of staff as well. So that's just duplicating, if not triplicating, process for what we're doing as a staff. So that's another issue that we're starting to see. Through Cyrus' team, we have developed a task force that are looking at a number of different options. Technology is one aspect. The other aspect is also looking at centralizing somehow the communications that's coming in and out. The third piece is looking at what does a reasonable service level look like in terms of providing a response. And the last piece is based on where everything lands there. It's still an early work in progress, really looking at some training that we might do in the new year based on that. That's all I wanted to talk about in terms of the memo that we presented. I just wanted to quickly talk about the active transportation file first, but David, do you want to
just add one comment. The other thing that we're starting to experience when we talk about senior staff is the challenge we have when we leave it to the developer or contractor on a project to actually meet the expectations that we have and requirements. So we're having an internal discussion about whether we should be bringing that in-house rather than relying on them and then having upset people out in the community and upset councillors for that matter because the individual hasn't applied.
Why do we hire outside contractors at all if we can bring them on internally? I thought we had no choice because we can't get the staff.
I'm talking about taking over more control over how communications in particular is delivered out in the field. Because at this point, for example, if I'm upset, I'm on the side of the street, I go up and talk, and our expectation is the contractor will hear what your problem is and deal with it. But if they're not doing that, then it comes back to us. And it's the same thing with and Councillor Murray's favorite, signage and that kind of thing. What we find is we're just not getting, for a variety of reasons, the kind of performance that we have in the past. So we're looking at some alternatives.
I'd like Peter to be able to charge through and get your stuff done if we can. Yeah.
No worries. So just the last piece here, I wanted to talk about the active transportation program, just because I know it was a topic of discussion at the last session. So just for council's awareness, in dividing up the district in three sections, just to be quite straightforward. If we look at the eastern section of our municipality, the key active transportation project that has funding and is proceeding forward is the Spirit Trail extension. You would have received an information report, I believe it was on Friday, to give you more information. So I'm not going to speak any more about that, but that's kind of the big priority that we're doing, and we are moving forward on that work. In the centre of the district, three main projects that are moving forward into construction that has funding for construction is the Lynn Valley Town Centre to Lynn Creek Town Centre Western Alignment. Just for clarity, that is going through the Kirkstone neighbourhood. It's also going through Kirkstone Park, and then through the city, it goes over Highway 1 down to Brooks Banks. Just to give some clarity in terms of that particular alignment. That does have funding, and we're planning to get that out to tender within the next 6 months. The second component that we have kind of also in that area is the missing link that we have on Mountain Highway between Arbalin and Highway 1. That similarly is about 6 months out from going out to the market, and we do have construction funding ready for that to proceed as well. The third piece in this region is further south along Main Street. So from the city's border through to harbour and getting better connections to the Second Narrows, we also do have funding available for that. We're hoping that in the coming months, we'll also have that out on the street to get tender pricing as well. A couple of projects that are currently progressing in our planning works, but we're still trying to figure out scope or the funding elements, is the Mountain Highway Safety Improvements, which is currently out in public engagement. We need to understand what that scope is before we can really finalise what the budget is. The last piece is also the second phase of Lynn Valley Road, active transportation improvements from Peters to Dempsey. That is a piece that currently does not have construction funding, but we are exploring some grant partner opportunities to try and realise that sooner rather than later. On the west side, the last two pieces here, we are looking at some Marine Drive improvements, effectively from Lionsgate through to the city's border. Again, we're hoping to have that out to tender in the coming months, either in Q4 or Q1, and that does have construction funding. The other piece of the puzzle that we are going a bit back to the drawing board and just confirming some scoping is the off arterial network there. So from Lionsgate, similarly also to the city, and looking at a neighborhood bikeway upgrade, we are reviewing some of those scopes. So you may have seen some of those pieces in terms of Lionsgate through to the city as well. That's a quick snapshot in terms of the active transportation and what we're progressing forward there.
Can I just clarify one thing you said? You said the Lynn Valley Phase 2, you're preparing to get construction funds. I don't think council's actually made a decision on Phase 2.
That is correct. So in terms of identifying it in the budget for the 5 or 10-year program, we're recognizing that even based on high-level estimates of what potential options could look like, we don't have sufficient funding.
Councillor Murray, your comments.
Well, thanks for that really quick, fast presentation. I mean, it does bear, you know, we spent nearly 2 hours on our schedules, and then this really important information that we've been asking for. It's now 10 to 9. That was far too quick for me. Because there's a lot of...
There's 3 workshops on capital and plus council meeting time still to come. There's lots of opportunity to talk about the capital presentation. Go ahead, Councillor Murray.
I'll go back to my previous comments about, you know, meetings and communications. And I feel like, you know, Mr. Stewart, one of our meetings after the election, talked about, you know, we're one team. And I will, you know, with all due respect, say that I feel like we're sometimes 2 teams and we're siloed. And I think there's so many things going on right now that we're missing the level of service delivery that we need to pay attention to. We've got a lot of letters coming in. And for you know, the new councils on you know, in the municipality, you know, the letters that we're getting, that's a lot. Sometimes you don't get any. It is a lot. And it's about a lot of different things. You know, we went through the process of 29th, the Cap Road light, you know, the chaos that ensued from not having enough time to send a bylaw on night work to council. I'm still not sure about that. I don't know why staff didn't have time to send it up to us to get our thoughts, because that created chaos. We are being given more tools to create efficiencies, but they are one size fits all, like report a problem. That's great if there's a hole on the road or, you know, a stop sign that's been pushed over. But for some bigger philosophical things that we need to talk to staff about, that's not going to work. The multiple ways of communication, and I will thank Mr. Cohen for bringing that up, his frustration. I've had that frustration for 20 years because on our website, we offer 3 ways to communicate with council: InfoWeb, mayor and council, and individual councillors. And I get multiple emails, as do we all. On Monday morning, we get it from the resident, we get it from InfoWeb, we get it from the clerk's department. It's a disaster. We've been through some major projects, and there's lots of big ones, but of course, we're always going to hear about the big ones that went sideways. There's been challenges in Deep Cove we have yet to talk about or do a post-mortem on that process. 3 major, a pipe being replaced, an entire road being redesigned, and a forest being cut down. You know, we've had impacts to the local community and the businesses. We have yet to talk about why it happened, how we're going to change things so it doesn't happen again.
So, Councillor Murray, I'm going to have to press you to return to the capital planning workshop subject.
And I was just going to get to that, but it just is, it is just sort of, so one of the capital items that I'm going to be bringing up is small, but I think it's indicative of the overall problem, is the siloing and the 2-team perspective that I have. Is the field house at Inter River that's part of a future capital planning. And although it's a small project, it's been on the books for years. We've been talking about it for years, 4 councils ago. And I understand that the consultation that was done on that project happened in the day. And, you know, I just feel like we are trying to be one team, but we're going in two different directions sometimes. And the buck stops with council, quite frankly. We're the ones that are going to be challenged. I think Catherine or Councillor Pope made comment about the budget last year and the challenge of that and the questions that were being asked in the community. And I know we're going to have more discussion about the capital projects, but it's how they're being implemented, it's how they're being planned, it's how they're being delivered, it's how they're being communicated to the community. I see inconsistency there. I see the checking of a box to be more important than how we communicate our vision or our direction with the local community. And we serve the community. And we need to feel comfortable that we are clear on what's going on and what's happening so we can be the advocates for the municipality when we're talking to the community. And often, I don't think we do know what's going on. I think staff does, but I don't think council always does. I'll leave it there.
I don't see any other speakers. Councillor Pope.
Hi, just picking up on the Handsworth project, because I know we've been getting flooded by many concerned parents and community members about when that's going to be built and completed. And for the record, I wondered if you could please address that.
Yeah, so I'll be handing to Stephanie from our parks in just a second, or Gavin's to add further to it, Stephanie. And so actually I'll pass to Stephanie now just to intro in terms of Handsworth.
And from the back row, I want you to belt it out because that's the microphone.
Or maybe even move over here, because it's really important that the parents hear what you have to say. Would you like me to move over?
Steph, you can move over here if you like. Sure.
Or the chair. Just sit right here at the table.
She probably could have.
Not to put you on the spot or anything. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so sorry, can you repeat the question? Just please provide an update with Handsworth and where it's at and where it's going to be.
Perfect. So currently staff is working louder. Currently, we're working directly with school district staff on site-specific needs surrounding potential ATF, artificial turf for Handsworth. The field, an artificial turf field was not in the original concept for the school, but now with council's direction, we are working on the planning process for this. So what that means is the first step in that is actually establishing the agreements with the school district and the Handsworth School itself. So that's what we're working on right now through the remainder of this year and then into early 2024. We'll begin site-specific assessments to figure out the technical components for putting in an artificial turf at that specific site. Following that, we move on to conceptual and detailed design, public engagement, and the schedule that's in the capital program has us on track for construction approximately 2025.
Thank you. Just to clarify, so it won't be built until 2025. Why is it taking that long?
These are extremely complex projects. And so with Council, District North Vancouver Council direction through this 2023 budget cycle, we have now started the exploratory and planning phases for this project.
To be clear, that was the comment at the time that 2024 was a design plan year and 2025 was a build year. That was what was presented to council at the time of the financial plan. Mr. Joyce?
Just to framework into a context, council, I mean, we are delivering this team $40 million artificial turf fields. The council's priority last year was active transportation, specifically the Spirit Trail and the ATFs, and multiple ATFs going on in this community right now.
just to also quickly add to the commentary as well, I keep these here, and it's something that we've learned from Argyle as well. This is a project that's not on our property, and so we need to be working collaboratively with the school district to making sure that both of our parties are in alignment so we can move forward. And when we've learned a lot through the Argyle process, and we want to be bringing those lessons to Handsworth when we get to it.
I'll add to for just some further context on that. Yes, we've completed Argyle and it's open and operating, and that's a very positive amenity for the community, but it's not something that you just can cookie cutter to the next site, Like each site is very, very specific. And so we need to do that evaluation now, which is what we've started to figure out how an ETF could fit specifically on the Handsworth site.
And I understand you'll be developing a website, or a website will be launched very soon to apprise everyone of the updates of Handsworth ATF.
That's right, and we want to do that in collaboration with the school district so that we are sharing the same information at the same time with the public. So we're working on that now.
Can you just, I'm Argyle for forever, and I know that there were a lot of problems, and I know what they are. Can you just clarify that for other people that are listening, how long it took to take Argyle, and allowing that there were things that we learned along the way, but it was a long process to get Argyle done.
Well, so the start of the Argyle project predates me, so I can't say that I can't speak to all of it. Certainly, at the point in time once the school was demolished and the site prep work was complete, we were actually able to move in, and we turned that project around once we were able to access the site. What was that, Peter, about 18 months, probably? So
that's a very key issue. A big in Argyle was the site wasn't turned over to us until dramatically later than we originally planned, because COVID hit, building the new school got delayed, whatever else. Mr. Joyce.
Yeah, Your Worship, I don't want to pick at this too much because we're having a very good relationship with the school district project. But a direct answer to the question, we were looking to it for a similar arrangement that the city had with Sutherland. We could have just repeated that day one, and we weren't able to do that. The school district had certain things they wanted to bring into a new arrangement. That took close to, I'd say, a year in working with our solicitor and their solicitor to get to that point. So the construction went as per planned. It's the initial phase, the first start. Now that we've got that, I think we can roll that into the next ETFs as we move forward. The start of that was in the legal framework that was started with the school district. Personnel change, they have different views on things and how things be delivered. And I think if council's going to put hard cash into a field, it's imperative we get the hours after the school closes to use that field for the community. We have to have that. Like you're going to put millions of dollars into a field, and that's what we will retain in Argyle, and that's what we'll be looking for in
Handsworth. I just had a question about Argyle Field, if I may, or sorry, Handsworth Field. We obviously aren't at the design phase fully, but the intent is to retain enough space for the 4-lane legal track or a 6-lane modified track, or is that entirely gone off of the radar at this point? Outside, we're leaving space for it. It's not part of the AT.
So I do know that in the past, a track has been contemplated at that site. The priority, as we understand it, and certainly from the school, would be the field. The site has a number of constraints to it. So our assessment, first what we'll do once we are able to get to the point of assessment is we will look at the footprint that's available. And then we'll be able to start figuring out how much space does the ATF itself take, and then what additional space may be left for other amenities, should that be the direction and the budget availability.
Mr. Joyce.
Your Worship, previous council has a sketch of concept. A 6-lane track was never on, it was just not possible. But there is the potential for a 4-lane track, but lots amount of fill and retaining walls have to be built to accommodate a track, so it'll be very, very expensive.
Yeah, the problem is the legal radius is for it to be a competition track. We could only meet it for a 4-lane. If you went to 6-lane, it made the space so large that with the creek setback on the east side and everything, it just wouldn't.
And the drive from the organization committee was for that 6-lane regional facility, not the 4-lane.
Yeah. Councillor Mary?
Well, I can't help but, point out that we've known this for years. This is, this is not a new revelation in regards to the fact that we can't fit the original track or the qualifying track around that ATF, because we know that we only have so much property. So, this begs the question of why everything takes so long. Why are we starting from scratch again? We have that information. 2 councils ago, we asked for that information. Staff came forward with that information. We talked to the school district. Where is it? Where is that information? Like we're not going to be able to fit a square peg in a round hole here. So we've made the commitment. I mean, it's a shame that we don't have. I know West Van is looking at a regulation size track in Ambleside. We've talked to Mayor Sager about that. It's a solution to the problem. It's too bad that we have to lose the track, but it is what it is because we moved the school. So I'm very interested in the process going forward, how we're going to mitigate the impact of the field that is going to be used, day and night because it's an ATF, and solve the problems that we're experiencing right now at Argyle in these areas where we are putting ATFs that impact residential neighborhoods. Sound mitigation has to be certainly something that we include. And, there's going to be fields like William Griffin that, are relatively isolated from residents, and it's fine. But then there's these other sites that are not, and we have to deal with that as part of the capital plan. So I just think I don't want to reinvent the wheel all over again and start all over. We've got information, let's move forward on it and see how we can realize this.
Thank you. I was just going to say, for my part on this going forward, I mean, one of the challenges is going to be cost and deliverability. All the public contracts that I've seen lately, I mean, obviously the Surrey hospital, $1 billion over, Metro might be a smidge over its estimates, we'll say, and some of the other contracts out there, they're all going up very rapidly. And so when I hear Mr. Joyce talk about 40 million in fields, 100 million in capital projects on the go, I get very nervous about do we have contingency enough to be able to make those projects actually complete in a reasonable cost? And if we have deliverability concerns about the capital plan, are you highlighting those to us? And when?
Well, that's a good segue, Your Worship. But one thing I wanted to talk about is just, I think I mentioned last year, your team here delivers about $60 million of project every year. It's easy to say what we haven't got to. It's just as important to look about what's been done. There's $214 million of capital projects out there now. We've done $121 million of that. Maplewood Fire Training Center, fields, buildings, fit outs for rec centers too. I mean, things that, we did one every decade a few years back. So there's a tremendous amount of capital work and resources in that area. I mean, we work closely with Rick, and you just did the financial plan amendment on the projects that are coming through. We'll be bringing it into River to you shortly with where those costs will be. And yes, I believe with cost escalation, you may have some, in the outer years, some decisions to make around the availability of funding if we have escalation that we've had so far. But, projects are tendered. They go through the process you had Peter describe, and then we'll work with finance to bring those forward to council if they're way over the budget side of things. But it's a concern.
Council, any further questions for tonight?
I just wanted to pick up on the fact that we have all discussed this at the most recent meeting, staff and the mayor and myself regarding Hansford. And I'm confident that staff is moving this forward, but we are also, and I've pushed hard for having more collaboration with the school board and to ensure that we're, you know, meeting everyone's needs and that we all understand what the expectations are. So with that in mind, we are also planning a further meeting coming up, hopefully within the next few weeks, between the same people and the school board to make sure that Handsworth is on track. Just wanted to add that.
And I think we have a dinner with the their council coming up shortly. Although I can't recall the name. There you go. Fantastic. Any more questions for tonight? Again, this is in a series of workshops bringing up these as we go through.
And we're going to do workshop number 3 with the communications. Workshop number 3.
The third component, it was a verbal update. I think I think the key takeaway from that is that we don't have answers just yet in terms of communication improvements. It's certainly something that staff are looking at in terms of how the communication can come in, what can we do to so that'll be a future update.
I heard that.
And corporate services is leading that.
So just to pick up on that, I would. No one responded to my email about this. But this discussion I wanted to have about having a point person in place and the discussion about the business development person for all of the complaints and concerns that we've seen through the Livable Deep Code project. Now, the Livable Deep Code project has many issues with it. It's taken up hundreds of hours of staff time in responding to retailers and residents and parking and like everything else going on there. We need to do better. Like we need to figure out a better way of communicating so that constituents can feel that they are having their needs addressed. And I just want to point to one example because I've heard about it again from the Deep Cove Community Association, and it's these bike racks. So they have repeatedly said these bike racks can't go in front of their house, in front of their restaurant. And yet it's still going on. It's going back and forth and back and forth, and it's just never ending. And now they've got bike racks and something and a bench outside their restaurant. And it's not going to enable them to have a patio like everybody else out there. And I'm loath to bring this up in this kind of a meeting, but the thing is, this is what it's come to. There's no other way for these people to get their concerns addressed than to come to me or every single other councillor here. And I think we've all said to the Merchants Association, yes, we will get that fixed. And yet it's still not happening.
So Mr. Joyce is going to give an update.
Or do you want me to go?
I'm going to lead in, you're going to go. But Mr. Joyce is going to do an update on all of the things that they were able to respond to immediately out of that. It is still their top recommendation to have the bike infrastructure in the space that it currently occupies from a safety perspective. I'm going to let Mr. Joyce respond to that, but we will do an update because we've already addressed the rain garden question. We changed up the fill that's going to be in there so that it has river rock and it doesn't look as ugly as it was. And others. So I'm going to let Mr. Joyce carry on from there.
And there was 5 items that were raised by the community association. By the way, who is the individual in front of the bike racks? So you should be aware of that.
Yes,
speaking
of course.
Yeah, well, it does get that representing the entire Merchants Association. It's our view those bike racks should stay there. We're down there twice on the weekend. They're fully utilized and used. If we take those out, there is no place we put them. Currently, some of the bikes are hooking up on the trees in front of Honey's. So that is, given the parking, the orientation, that is the best location for that bike rack. I'm suggesting that to that merchant, that is potentially not the final location. Let's go through a season of the flex space, because what we do now, what we're gonna have to do next is look at all the merchants and what space they get out in front of their businesses. Some want the space, some don't. So his may be slightly offset by 8 or 10 feet at the most.
Which will be ridiculous.
Well, it's ridiculous to take the bike racks away from in front of his location.
Well,
There's no engineering group that's going to recommend that.
Installed the bike racks in front of his location.
Councillor Pope, they're fully utilized Saturday, Sunday.
Because they need bike racks.
So you can put them over on the other side.
Right, Councillor
Pope, put them over the other side.
Councillor Pope, both of you stop for a sec. So I think the point Mr. Joyce is trying to make is that there's a certain inelasticity. Somebody comes down with their bike and they don't want to park it a block away or 2 blocks away. And if we put the bike rack over where I think there's more space, and I made that argument over by the fountain on the other side, the response I got back from staff I thought was reasonable. You're just going to have people locking up their bikes to the trees more.
We can show you
because they want to keep them immediately right where they are. And so unless we can find an alternate location for the bike rack that is in the same block on the same side, which means we're giving up very expensive plaza space to do it, then I don't know that we have another viable site. So I tend to be supportive of what Mr. Joyce is recommending, which is that we go through a season and see how it works.
Right. And even with that recommendation, if we take 1 year to look at the flex space, I'm pretty sure by the time we do that, we can accommodate this gentleman's wishes, which was during the COVID experience where he had a table just offset immediately out front of his spot. So there'll be 3 or 4 businesses that will not require the patio space by the time we've done our exercise plan. And so we would revisit at that time. The other issues are some repainting in the rocks you mentioned, Your Worship, and some signage that has either come down or on the purpose. These were things as part of our wind up project. That was the one outstanding item.
I did go back down and double check and look at the space, and if there was going to be a viable spot on the southern side of the road, it would be right at the rain garden. I think right at the rain garden, you could potentially move that size of a rack down there, and so I hope we can look at it, but I tend to support it's in, let's take a look at it and see, but.
What about the bench? Can't you move the bench?
Peter, anything of the bench? I'm just trying to think of the bench. The bench is on. I don't remember where the bench is. I'm not sure that's material to the patio area.
No, so a couple of things to add just in terms of both the bike rack and the bench. If they were relocated, it likely wouldn't change the patio space available for that particular merchant. The space that we've identified for the flex space in the permanent situation pretty much mimics the space that was available during the pandemic. And so in terms of like-for-like situation of what's been there the last couple of years, we've basically built what's there. So from our perspective, we are of the opinion that it's installed, let's see how it operates, and then we can monitor and identify whether any.
From my perspective, it's a bench on top of the bike racks that are already pissing off this business who's already lost a ton of money during all of this construction work. And so I just feel like, can't we do better? And can't we have somebody, instead of us sitting at the stinky ball, who is responding to all of these concerns and not, as you said, going to you and then going to somebody else and then going to another staff member and then going to counselors and all of that. So I'm back to my point of needing some kind of person who's a point person when we have big projects going on, and we get a lot of emails about from residents or from neighbors or from businesses. Like, we need somebody who's not taking all this expensive staff time away from the really important work that needs to be done, who can be an intermediary. And I don't know what the solution to that is, but I did want to have a conversation about, you know, what our development business manager does, because Councillor Back had told me what the original thought was in hiring that person, that part of the role would be something along the lines of what I'm describing. So could it be that, or could we add it to that person's job description? Or
Leo has been responding to them and meeting with them on a regular basis, and also including the project manager, which I believe is Shane on that one.
It's not working.
They also came to me and I went and I met with them. I know they've met with a number of members of council. I have to tell you, I have a little bit of an impression that they're not happy with the answers they've been getting, and so they're just checking in with more people. I think that NEO was available to them for concerns, but NEO is not development services person who can give you answers about where a drain is or where the construction materials are going to go. That has to go to the project manager.
The unhappiness about the bike racks. So if we don't have that person, then how could we
have the person? It's just on technical matters. It's Shane on that project. So and they talked to Shane and they weren't satisfied with the answer that they got, so they went to other people as well. But it was sent to our staff person first.
So just a question for Gavin. At some point, we're going to be working on all this flex space. That's for a year from now. That's early. And so if we actually can find a solution to make sure that, because I think what his real concern is, he wants to be able to continue to have some outside space. And he could have that.
Well, he already will have the space that's immediately in front of his place. This is about the additional space on the plaza portion as well. And in which case,
then your worship could just be slightly offset because we're sure the business in front next to him wouldn't require that space.
Anyway, I'm asking the question, if that's a process that's coming in a fairly reasonable time period, if in fact we can identify a solution that doesn't require removal of the bike rack or requires it to be moved slightly, is that something we could advance without saying, no, we're just going to wait for a year and see?
Yeah, we can look at that. I mean, I didn't instruct the team to go out there and start jacking and removing bike racks. I really don't believe that. When I've looked at this 4 ways to Sunday about what would work, this is the best location. Sorry. I mean, council could direct me to do that. It's nothing illegal or a safety issue. I wouldn't recommend it, but council as a whole.
Going back and digging up what's just been completed is optically also has problems. Councillor Miri, your comments?
Well, I think, let's look at the big picture here. Like, the work down in Deep Cove, the plaza at Lionsgate, the plaza at Lynn Valley, there's good things and then there's challenges behind all of them. I think we need to, I remember when we built Parkgate, one of the lessons that we learned was, build bigger multi-purpose spaces because more people will use the space. And when we build big gyms, don't expect to hold social functions in them because the acoustics are so bad. And I think we had that experience during the election at Lionsgate. I do think that we need to always look back and learn from the projects that we've done and implemented, what worked, what didn't. I mean, Deep Cove from the beginning, 3 major projects, as I commented earlier, one after another. It was just, we were waiting for it to implode. It's not just one business down there. All of us have met with several businesses. We've been called by several businesses and residents as well. And I just think that we need to go back and look at what worked and what didn't. That project started off with wanting to put more space in so people could spread out. And we put more space in, but we filled it with a whole bunch of stuff. And we've talked about that so many times, but it just never resonated. And it just kept going forward in the same form. So we have to start, at the very beginning with the community and with the businesses and on future projects and walk through these things with them. So we're all on board. So we're working as a team. We're finding that middle ground. I'll say, and Gavin was probably a young engineer when we built the apartments on Gallant, the new apartments on Gallant, and lamp posts ended up being placed in the middle of the sidewalks, which, didn't work. We also put lamp posts in the middle of the sidewalks running all the way down the parkway. And so you got to learn from your mistakes. You got to learn from what worked and you got to repeat it. And then the stuff that doesn't work, you got to come back and rethink it. And I think that the communication process in the Cove was very bumpy. I mean, the Cove is of course, there's a lot of ownership down there. People, it's their passion. They love it. It's a jewel in our community. like everywhere in the municipality. But we really got to start with at the ground level and work for it. And it was a challenging, bumpy process that I don't want to repeat again. The other thing was taking the money from that grant and being under the gun to do it when we were having all these challenges, when we were putting a pipe in, or we had to reroute a road and talked about a little access road and it turned into clear cutting a forest. All of those things we really haven't talked about, and what's going to change so we don't have that happen again. And that's what I want to discuss. And I worry some of these big, huge projects like fields and all this other stuff we're doing. I got to understand that the clarity and the communication and the decisions and the information that we're going to be implementing in the direction that we're going in, we're all on the same page. We agree. I mean, obviously not all of us, but we have to get the most amount of people seeing the vision and being supportive of it, because we've seen project after project be bumpy, and it's a split decision, and it's not what we're meant to do. It's not good business for anyone.
Thank you. Councillor Pope.
Again, the role of the mediator or somebody in between, I think might help in some ways. Meanwhile, I'd like to support Mr. Stewart's suggestion that we not wait another year to determine whether the bike racks can stay or not stay. And perhaps you can refresh my memory of exactly what you were suggesting.
I'm saying if what we can or can't do really depends on the layout of the flex space. And we know that that's the next sort of shoe that's going to drop, because many of the merchants want to take advantage of that space. We should get going with that planning. And if as a result of that planning, a solution becomes evident, we don't have to wait a year necessarily to implement it.
That makes sense to me. So that could happen in time before the next spring rush season.
Commitment from Mr. Joyce and Mr. Stewart to take a look at it. Okay. Great. Any other questions tonight about the capital plan?
Your worship, I'm getting some advice. Sorry, somebody has their hand up.
I'm sorry?
Somebody may have their hand up. We need to speak at the meeting, I'm hearing.
We're not on the public input.
I'm not seeing them. Where are they?
Under inquiry cost. So Megan ends and inquiry cost.
Okay. Yeah, no, it is our policy at the end of, so I'm assuming we're finished our part of the discussion, but it is our policy that if we have time at the end of a workshop to allow up to 10 minutes of public input on the matter. So see two hands, Megan Enns and Corey Cost. Corey Cost is going to be over here first. So Corey Cost, can you hear me?
Yes, Your Worship. Can you hear me?
Clearly. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the
okay, this is going to be a bullet stuff, and you'll probably have to review the video to find out what I'm saying. So we may not have bike lanes in Edmont Village, but we have a large number of bike racks, just for your information. As far as Lisa Muri mentioning the large gyms in Lower Cap, the speaker systems is the wrong speaker systems. That's all you need to do. I know all about acoustics. You just need more of them in a gym that's really big, and you'll get superb acoustics. I noticed 2 items. The one we've been waiting for many years to get consulted about. Capilano Road cycling link delayed for public engagement. We're waiting for public engagement. It's a very important thing for our community. I noticed when I'm trying to find the Indigenous holiday for 2024, I didn't see it. It would be nice when hovering over those calendars, over those yellow parts, to actually show what the holiday means. Like December 25 would say Christmas. Lighting, I noticed that the lighting tone for Councillor Ma in his face is very distracting. Occasionally he just flashes right up there. No, I don't know what's going on. The council schedule should explicitly say no meeting. Don't just blank the space for any Monday or Tuesday. Be explicit. Say no meetings. really would like the public to benefit by having access to this so-called agenda planner. The acoustics, Mayor Little is fine all evening. Pope, very weak and noisy background. Forbes, really bad. Murray, loud and clear. Ma, loud and clear. Hansen, weak. Back spoke so little I couldn't get enough statistics to tell whether he had any problems at all.
Efficient.
Okay, anyway, for better, staff report should be balanced, technically comprehensive. And please, again, finally, not too many items on the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will point out that September 30th is the Truth and Reconciliation Day, and it is marked with yellow, but you're quite correct. Some of these, if we had a little legend on the side that said what the different days were, maybe that would be helped to make sure we don't have like Arbor Day off or something as a stat holiday or something.
And I'll speak in a louder voice, Mr. Cost, Dr. Cost.
Fantastic. I believe we also have Megan Enns wishing to speak. Can you hear me, Megan Enns?
I can hear you. Hi,
welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the workshop.
I don't think I'll need that long. I just wanted to say how disappointed I am that there's still no plan or in field at Handsworth. My son is in grade 10, most likely will not have a field his whole high school career. I have reports from DNV staff from 2019 saying they agree with it, they're going to work with it. Every time it's a new person that writes me back saying they're working with this person or they're working with that person, they're waiting on this, they're waiting on that. Like Vancouver College built their ATF in 2 months. We're doing a resurfacing of William Griffin and it's taking 8 to 10 months. My son needs to have surgery on his knee because the practice field that they're using at Handsworth is clearly unsafe. And I'm now considering looking outside of my community so that my son can play sports. It is a mental health issue. They have not had a field in 3 years. They are walking in the canyon for gym. This is a crisis. It's the largest school in North Van. And I want to see, well, I'm going to start asking where my tax dollars are going pretty soon, but I want to see a better commitment. Argyle has just been done. I know you've got findings and learnings, and it may take you 4 years to figure out how to do it right, but I can't wait that long. I want some action. I've been working on this since my daughter was in grade 7. She now has a field, but she's at UVic. Like she didn't have anything. So now my son is in grade 10. I'd like him to have a field before he graduates. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Okay, Council, we've gone through the subject matter of the evening. I will accept adjournment. Offered, accepted. Thank you very much. Thank you for all of your work to prepare for the meeting today.